Let's talk about something huge that's shaking up the world right now. Something that's going to hit your grocery bill, your car payments, and maybe even the way entire countries get along with each other. Today, April 3, 2025, US President Donald Trump rolled out a trade policy that's nothing short of a global game changer. Tariffs on every single country that sends goods to America. This isn't just a little tweak to the system or a slap on the wrist for one or two nations. It's a full-blown, take-no-prisoners move that's got everyone from factory workers to CEOs to world leaders wondering what's coming next. Think about it. Everything you buy, from the shoes on your feet to the phone in your hand, could cost more in a matter of days. It's the kind of news that makes you sit up and pay attention, because this isn't just about numbers. It's about how we live, how we trade, and how the world keeps spinning. So, what exactly happened? Yesterday, April 2nd, Trump stood in the White House Rose Garden and laid out his plan with that signature confidence of his. He announced a universal 10% tariff on all imports, set to kick in on April 5th, just 2 days from now. But that's just the opening act. Starting April 9th, a second wave of tariffs hits, and these ones are even bigger, targeting 60 specific countries with what he's calling reciprocal rates. China's getting slammed with a 54% tariff on its $400 billion in annual exports to the US. The European Union's looking at 20% on its $500 billion. Japan's at 24%, India's at 26%, South Korea's at 25%, and Vietnam, poor Vietnam, is facing a staggering 46%. Even Canada and Mexico, who've been dealing with a 25% tariff since earlier this year, aren't fully off the hook. They dodge the new baseline but still feel the pressure. And then, just to keep things interesting, Trump dropped another bombshell today. A 25% tariff on all imported cars, effective immediately, with auto parts likely next in line. We're talking about $1.4 trillion in US imports getting caught up in this net, way more than the $380 billion he tangled with back in his first term. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? This isn't some quiet policy change. It's a loud, bold statement that's already sending shockwaves across the planet. Now, you might be wondering, why is Trump doing this? What's the big idea here? Well, if you've followed him over the years, this isn't exactly a surprise. He's been banging this drum for a long time, saying America's been getting a raw deal in global trade. The US trade deficit hit $1 trillion in goods in 2024, and that number's like a red flag waving in front of him. He's always pointed to how other countries, like China, with its 13.8% tariffs on US exports, or India, with 17%, put up these walls against American goods, while the US has kept its average tariff at just 2.5%. It's not fair, he says, and he's out to fix it. His word for it is reciprocal. If they tax us, we tax them back, and maybe a little harder just to make the point. He's even pulled out a big legal gun, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, calling trade imbalances a national emergency, because he wants to bring manufacturing jobs back home, pump up American industry, and, here's a practical angle, raise some serious cash to cover $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that are expiring this year. His economic advisor, Peter Navarro, crunched the numbers and says these tariffs could bring in $6 trillion over the next decade. That's trillion with a T, the kind of money that could reshape budgets, fund projects, or just make a big splash. But it's not just about the dollars, it's about the message. Trump's out there saying, America's done playing nice, and he's betting this will force the world to rethink how it deals with the US. It's a high-stakes play, no doubt about it, and it's got people talking, some cheering, some panicking, and a whole lot in between. Let's zoom out for a second and look at how this is landing. Markets didn't waste a single minute reacting. Today, the S&P 500 dropped 3.4%. That's a big dip, the kind that makes investors sweat. The Nasdaq fell even harder, down 4.2%. Over in Japan, the Nikkei took a 5% nosedive, its worst day in years. And if you're into safe bets, gold shot up to $2,800 an ounce as people rushed to stash their money somewhere stable. It's chaos out there, and you can feel the tension in the air. For regular folks in the US, this isn't just Wall Street noise, it's personal. Take that $50 pair of sneakers you might grab from Vietnam. With a 46% tariff, that's now $73. Or picture a $30,000 imported car, say, a Toyota or a BMW. With the new 25% auto tariff, you're suddenly paying $37,500. That's real money coming out of real pockets. The Peterson Institute ran the numbers and figures U.S. households could be looking at an extra $3,400 a year in costs. Think about that. $3,400 could be a vacation, a new appliance, or just a little breathing room in the budget, and now it's gone. Inflation's already sitting at 3.2%, and Fitch Ratings is warning it could climb to 5%. That's the kind of jump that keeps economists up at night, whispering about stagflation, when prices soar but the economy stalls. The Tax Foundation's got its own grim take. If other countries hit back, this could shave 0.2% off U.S. GDP and cost 223,000 jobs. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's a silver lining Trump's banking on. Steel production's already up 8% since March tariffs, according to the Commerce Department. That's jobs, that's factories humming, that's the kind of thing he can point to and say, see? It's working. Still, companies like Nike and Apple saw their shares drop 7% today, and that's a sign the pain might outweigh the gain for a while. Now, let's hop across the Atlantic and see what this means for Europe. The European Union's a $16 trillion economy, and it sends $500 billion worth of goods to the US every year. A 20% tariff on that? That's a big deal. Germany's Volkswagen could lose $5 billion annually. Imagine the ripple effect through factories, supply chains, and workers' lives. Italy's Parmigiano makers, though? They're a little more chill. They've been through this before with 25% duties in 2019, and Americans still shelled out for that fancy cheese. But for everyday stuff, groceries, clothes, medicine, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen sounding the alarm, saying prices could rise 5 to 10% across the continent. That's not pocket change when you're already juggling bills. Europe's not just sitting there either. They're gearing up to fight back with $24 billion in tariffs on U.S. goods, targeting things like bourbon and farm products, especially in Republican-leaning states. It's a chess move, a way to hit back where it hurts politically. You can almost hear the frustration in von der Leyen's voice when she called it a major blow, and she's not wrong. This is the kind of thing that tests alliances, that makes you wonder how long the U.S. and Europe can stay on the same page when the stakes get this high. And it's not just Europe feeling the heat. Let's take this global. China's got a 54% tariff on its $400 billion in U.S. exports, and they're not taking it lightly. Beijing's already hinting at countermeasures, maybe devaluing their currency, maybe choking off rare earth metals that the U.S. tech industry depends on. Japan's PM Shigeru Ishiba's pushing for talks, trying to keep things calm, but Canada's Mark Carney's got a sharper tone, promising a forceful response. Ontario's Doug Ford even floated the idea of cutting power to the U.S. Northeast. Imagine that, a trade war turning off the lights. South Korea's scrambling to prop up its industries with emergency aid, Vietnam's staring at $50 billion in export losses, and India's $46 billion trade surplus could shrink fast with that 26% tariff. The World Trade Organization's waving a red flag, warning this could spiral into a 1930s-style trade war. Think Great Depression vibes, but with smartphones. Fitch Ratings backs that up, projecting a 0.8% drop in global GDP by 2026 if this keeps escalating. Markets are jittery, U.S. stock futures are down, the dollar's wobbling, and the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index just doubled since February, hitting an all-time high. Americans love their cheese enough to pay more, but most goods won't have that luxury. Von der Leyen's 5 to 10% price hike warning is sobering. Imagine your weekly shop in Paris or Berlin suddenly costing more, all because of a decision made in Washington.